Hello, in this lecture we're going to continue on with our discussion of market failure versus government failure, Chapter 8. Remember that our goals are to explain what an externality is and show how it affects the market outcome, describe 3 methods of dealing with externalities, define public good, and explain the problem with determining the value of a public good to society, explain how informational and moral hazard problems can lead to market failure, and explain why market failure is not necessarily a reason for government intervention. Now, we've talked in the past about some problems where markets have some issues, where markets have problems, and we've discussed those problems in terms of one being externalities, both positive and negative. We've talked about some options that the government will have. We're going to talk now about an optimal policy. An optimal policy is one in which the marginal cost of undertaking the policy equals the marginal benefit of that policy. So same concept we've seen multiple times. We're going to put the policy in place where the marginal cost of doing it is equal to the marginal benefit. Same kind of idea. We're making decisions on the margin in the policy here. So resources are being wasted if the policy isn't optimal. So obviously if we have something that is not optimal, then we're wasting resources. We're not achieving our objective of the policy. For example, the optimal level of pollution is not zero pollution, but the amount where the marginal benefit of reducing pollution equals the marginal cost. That may seem counterintuitive to many people because obviously if we're thinking about a problem of pollution, oftentimes we're going to think, well, we want zero pollution, but that may not be optimal, and we may not know exactly what that optimal state is. But we think that there probably is some type of state where there's a marginal cost and a marginal benefit to the reduction of the pollution to some type of level that would give us an optimal level. We can see that conceptually. How to see that in reality where that is more difficult, but it is clear, or it seems more clear to think that it's not practical to shoot for zero pollution because that just doesn't seem like a practical method. Public goods. A public good is non-exclusive and non-rival. So let's talk about what public goods are and what effect they may have when we might have a public good and how we might have to treat a public good. So non-exclusive means that no one can be excluded from its benefits. So once this public good is in place, no one can be excluded from its benefits. Non-rival consumption by one does not preclude the consumption by another. So often, many times we have this idea, and it's true in many things, if we consume more, then it could be true that someone else is going to consume less of it. Now, of course, if we make more stuff, then that dynamic changes. But in a pure public good, we have this non-exclusive and non-rival. Now, you can think of this in terms of the best examples of these are things that are like natural, like nature. If you think about the sun, it's basically a public good in light and warmth and whatnot. I can take as much light and warmth myself and not take away the light and warmth to somebody else. Of course, there are exceptions to that because if I grow a big tree in my yard and it shades the other person's yard, then I have maybe violated that principle. And so there is no such thing as like a pure public good. It's a conceptual thing. Things can tend more towards the public good, not really a pure public good. You can think of something like air or something like that. And once again, I can breathe as much as I want. And theoretically, I'm not taking away from anybody else. Although, of course, we do have air pollution and those types of things. So even that, we have exceptions to the rule of something being a pure public good, even like nature. So many goods provided by the government have public good aspects to them. So if we think about the government, a lot of things that we see the government doing are things that maybe have a large, basically positive externality, have this large free rider problem, which means they are closer to having public good elements a lot of times. We talked about the lighthouse, for example. If one individual is going to benefit from the lighthouse, if they put the lighthouse in, everybody benefits, but because one individual may not receive the benefit themselves, even though society does, the problem there is the lighthouse might not get built, and we can think about if the lighthouse was built, not only is that one individual benefiting, but everybody that comes in is benefiting in terms of the ships that can now see how to navigate at certain times. And you can even say that we're all benefiting in that we have goods coming into the harbor in a more safe way, and therefore that might make cheaper goods and this type of thing. Therefore, a lighthouse is something that could be made and thought of as something that should be more of a public good or something that a government would have to step in on. The biggest example of that's been recognized for a long time is, of course, the military. No one individual has the benefit to really make a military and profit from it, because obviously in order to profit from a military, you have to go wage wars in areas. If we had a military and it was just for defense, and we weren't actively looking to gain profit through military action, but in order to safeguard and act in the needs of national defense, then once the military is put in place, we all benefit from it. Once the military is in place and we are now safer from it, all citizens are partaking in that safety once the military is made. And that's another idea, that it's a free rider effect. If one individual did it, they couldn't exclude the fact that everybody would be benefiting from it. Therefore, it has these aspects of public goods in them. And that's why basically the government has a role, often it will generally have a role in defense. Another idea of that is, say, like roads. The roads are public made in the U.S., and the idea of there being that if we made the road for ourselves, we can make the road, but once we make the road and we let other people drive on it, we could try to make toll roads and stuff like that, but that really detracts from the ability to go places, so that's not very efficient. And if we made a road and we let other people use it, then of course there's the idea that we have this big free rider effect again. And so that's another area where we believe that basically it could be good to have the public put in the road, and therefore we have this public good. Now again, it's not a pure public good, because obviously the more we drive on the road, we know that there is congestion on the road. It's not a pure public good in that way, because if I drive on it, we are taking away some drivability or some speed that could go on the road from someone else, depending on the time of day of the road. So a private good is only supplied to individual who bought it. So if we think about goods or services, if we buy a phone or if we buy anything, we are benefiting from it. We are the ones that are benefiting. So the transaction between A and B, and the benefit is coming to the person who purchases the good. Once a pure public good is supplied to one individual, it is simultaneously supplied to all individuals. So on a public good, if you think about something like a lighthouse, once one person puts the lighthouse in there, they can't help the fact that every other ship out there is going to be benefited by the lighthouse. I mean, even if they don't pay for it, they're going to be benefited. You can't help it. If we put a military in place, then everybody's going to be benefited from that added safety. Whether they recognize it or not, it's going to benefit anybody. We can't stop that. We can't say the military is going to protect these people and not these people because they paid for it. Once the public good's in place, everybody benefits from it. In the case of a public good, the social benefit of the public good, its demand curve, is the sum of the individual benefits. Let's take a look at an example of what we're saying here. A public good is enjoyed by many people without diminishing in value. So if we say that we have person A and we're saying this is their demand curve for this particular public good, and then we have person B, this is their demand curve for the particular public good, they may have different demand curves, meaning at any unit of the public good, the quantity, they may value it at different prices. People may have different demand curves on it. However, we can think conceptually, if we were able to sum up all the demand curves, that would be the market demand for the public good. So that would be the market demand. Of course, it's difficult for us to do that in reality. We couldn't really measure up every individual's demand curve for something like the military. That would be very difficult to do. However, we can think conceptually that would make sense. We can say, well, the value of the military would be the added values of the demand curves, how much it would be worth to each individual who is benefiting from it.